Okay, in this clip we're going to talk about the different worksheets that are available in the Qualitative and Quantitative Developmental Math Assessment and Intervention Protocol book. Okay, so in the yellow tab, if you buy a tab book, otherwise it begins on page 7. The first, this isn't a worksheet, but these are the developmental phases that you will be referring to when you are assessing your students. So we have the emergent phase, the matching phase, the quantifying phase, the partitioning phase, the factoring phase, and the operating phase. So when you read the definition or the descriptors under each phase, it will help you know which phase your student is working in. Okay, we then have a score sheet, and again, if you buy the if you have the USB device, that this is all fillable. So here's the score sheet that you can use, and on the side you can see the different colors. So this green means this portion is the one that you're going to do with all your students. This is the pink, so this would be for your primary students. This part is the blue, so this is where you would begin with your upper students, or the students that at least have some understanding of tens and ones. You can start here. And this is this section is for fraction concepts, which would also be with the students that are older. This sheet is the assessment summary sheet. So after you've given the assessment and you have a score, so for example, in each of these boxes, I might put a check, and then if I'm not using the fillable form, I would just count how many checks, and then I would put the total up here in the box. If you are using the fillable form, the number should appear in the box automatically. If not, you can add them and then put that up there. When you get to the assessment summary sheet, this is a nice sheet, so you can just remind yourself and take the notes. So on the side, any assessment you gave, you can just write yourself the score, and you can write comments and general observations during testing. Also, you can mark which phase this child is working in and which phase the child, the same age peers, are working in, and that way we can see if there's a discrepancy or not. This form is if you have a whole class and you're assessing, let's say you're assessing all your students, or you're just noticing developmentally what they're able to do, you can keep track of all the student names, and then you can mark the things that you see. So for example, these different color bands are different phases. So this is the matching phase, the quantifying phase, the partitioning phase, the factoring phase, and the operating phase. And I just put down kind of the main milestones for these different phases. So if a child, let's say you have a primary student and you know that they can rote count to double digits, you can mark that. If you're working with upper grade students, you might not, and you know that they're working at a higher phase, you don't necessarily have to go through and mark each one, but you might be surprised that sometimes in a lower phase something is missing. And so if you go and notice everything from each phase, you might go, you know what, I'm not sure if they really have all their combinations to 10. Maybe that's why, even though they're working with multiplication, they're struggling because they don't really have their combinations to 10 down. So going through those early phases can be quite helpful if you have a struggling student and they should be working in a higher phase. Or even if they're working in a higher phase in some areas, but they're just doing strange things with numbers. That's where you're going to notice what should they be doing. And on this side, we have a classroom assessment spreadsheet. So we have the student names, and we have, let's say, a beginning assessment, a mid-year assessment, and the end-of-year assessment. So if you're going to assess, let's say you're a specialist and you're going to assess students more than once throughout the year, you might write the score that each child gets for each of the assessments, and then put the phase. And that way, when you assess them in the mid-year or assess them late in the year, you can see if there's growth. And this is a nice worksheet to track kids over time. And this worksheet is important when you are assessing the students who are already working with tens and ones, and inside each box you will be writing down what the students are doing with the base 10 blocks. Sometimes you don't have much to write, but sometimes they're doing some interesting things, and you can really describe the way they're counting or what they're doing with the blocks, or whatever that you're noticing. So even though the problems are written here, I have the task card, so the students can be looking at the problem on the task card, and then I can be writing down what they're doing. They can have a plain sheet of paper, and they can do the work on the paper. So this worksheet is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pages. So it goes from addition and subtraction to the rounding, multiplication and division, and then fractions. And quite honestly, when if you're working with struggling students, you're not going to get past more than just a couple of the first questions and fractions. If the students are really able to work with the like the fraction problems over here, they are probably already in a good place, unless they are, for example, maybe they're in middle school and they should be even beyond this. So it just depends. So if you have a 5th or 6th grader who are struggling, they're probably going to be stuck about right here. If you have a 4th grader, they're going to be working in just pretty much the first 2 questions.